Hello and welcome to the Situation Report today. Glad to have you joining me. This is the show where we do our best to give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. Once in a while, I'll talk about those words. Information. We need the right information. We need the right perspectives. How do we look at what's happening in the world? And boy, do we need it in order to navigate an ever-changing culture. I hope that this will be one of those episodes for you. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker. I am your host. And today we're going to ask a very simple question of our guest. What is going on in the world? It's a very simple question. What's going on in the world? I'm grateful to have on today a guest who has a really probably unique view of what's happening in our country as it relates to the legal system, as it relates to crime and crime rates, even the gun debate we're having right now. He has a very unique perspective, and we need his perspective. We need the information that he gives, but probably more importantly today, we need the perspective that he has. Because as we see rising crime in our country, there are a lot of pundits that will tell us why crime is rising, and everyone wants to obviously dismiss or distance themselves from what's happening. It can't be their responsibility. Maybe the government needs to do something else. He has a different perspective on that. We'll talk about that. The gun issue, a conversation that needs to be had and needs to continue to be had. He gives us a great perspective on that as well, and really why crime is rising and why we're having the issues we are with guns connected as he describes those for us. And then just our legal system. What is it that we have? How does it work? I'm so thankful to be able to have this conversation. If you're anything like me, you can be overwhelmed by what you hear on the news and what you see happening around you. I end this discussion today, this interview, by asking, what are you looking forward to? What are you optimistic about in our country? What can we look to and be encouraged by? And man, he gives a great answer. My guest today is Sheriff Bill Waybourn. Sheriff Waybourn is the sheriff of Tarrant County Sheriff's, Tarrant County Sheriff's Department. I've said it wrong every time I've tried to say it. Tarrant County is that county right outside of Dallas, the Fort Worth area, and he has so many good things to say. I'm really grateful that I can bring this conversation to you. As you know, our friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of your life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Now Mike has done it again by introducing his My Slippers. For a limited time, you will save $90 on a pair of My Slippers. This blowout sale of the year won't last, so order now. Mike has taken 2 years to develop the My Slippers, and they are designed to wear both indoor and out all day long. Made with MyPillow foam and impact gel to help prevent fatigue, they are also made with quality leather suede. Call 1-800-870-0283, use the promo code SITREP, or go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, and use promo code SITREP. This offer will not last long, so order now with promo code SITREP at mypillow.com. It is an honor today to have on as my guest Sheriff Bill Waybourn, Sheriff of Tarrant County, Texas. Tarrant County. I said that right. Tarrant County. I looked at it, I went, that can't be right. That is right. It's the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's what most people would know of that area. Sheriff Waybourn, thank you so much for taking some time to come and talk to us today. Really appreciate it.
Well, you're very, very welcome, and I'm honored to be here.
I want to get into a couple specific things, but before we get there, if it's okay, I'd love for you just to share your story with our audience, how you got into law enforcement, kind of your journey to where you are now. My son is 21 years old and works for our local police department. He's waiting on a date for an academy. He's got that coming up in a couple months. And love law enforcement, love the story of those who are in law enforcement. And I'd love to hear your story. How does one get to be where you are?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited for your son. What an exciting time for him to begin such a noble career. I knew I wanted to be a cop as a teenager. And in fact, when I got out of high school and decided that necessarily college wasn't for me, I was able to join the Air Force and being part of their security forces and security police. Had a great time. And then while I was in the Air Force, I actually got to go through the police academy here in Texas, and got out and came into law enforcement and hadn't looked back. So I've been doing it either in the military or everything else for my entire life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, my son, he started with the Explorer program when he's 14 years old. He's been around this for a long time and loves it. We're in a good community, so I'm thankful for that. And it is an honorable profession. It seems that many in our country right now are down on law enforcement. I'm here in California. I'm in a great community here. We're in Riverside County. We've got an incredible sheriff.
Yes, you do.
Sheriff Chad Bianco is our sheriff here. He's incredible. But outside of Riverside County, things get a little weird, and this is a place where people don't love law enforcement, and that's kind of been a theme over the last couple of years. What do you say to folks who look at those going into the profession or who've been in the profession for a long time as you have and have a negative view of what's happening?
Well, first of all, Chad Bianco is an outstanding individual, great sheriff, and a good friend.
Yeah.
I would say to people right now that America has been an incredible country, and we have ebb and flow, and we have low times, and we have great times. And in this time of what appears to be anti-law enforcement, I do believe, and I'm an optimist, that pendulum is swinging back, where people, what they're seeing or what they're knowing is they don't want crime in their community. They don't want violence in their community. They understand if you're going to be in business or if you're going to work, the thing that counts is that you're safe at doing it. And the rule of law that gives us all fair play is so important. And I think people, I got to believe that absolutely the majority of people believe that right now on both sides of the aisle. And I'm optimistic that pendulum will swing back, and some of the naysayers will be just put back in the stands where they belong.
Right. You have been at this for a long time. You've probably seen the best of people and the worst of people, and that interaction with our legal system. What, with your experience, would be your characterization of our legal system? And again, I know you've had, even in your county, some folks who have pushed back on some of the decisions that you've made, and this is common, right? I mean, this is how it works. But you've had to deal with this. Again, seeing good, seeing bad. How would you characterize kind of the American legal system and how these people on the outside, they look at it so differently than understanding really what's happening from where you're sitting?
Well, sometimes the legal system appears to fail miserably, and sometimes it appears to get everything right. But what people need to remember is it's your neighbor, it's your friends, it's the people across town from you that are called judges and lawyers and cops. And really, I got to tell you that all the judges that I know, all the lawyers that are in the courtroom that I have done business with have been people of going, hey, we really are just seeking justice. We are seeking out to make sure that due process is done, which our Constitution applies to, and making sure that fair play is here. But at the end of the day, especially in the criminal world, sometimes it is just the judgment of the guy in the black robe or girl in the black robe that says, I think this is what's fair.
Right.
And you and I might not agree with them, or we might think it's too much or too little, and that happens all the time.
I've had the opportunity. I was in the Marine Corps, and since then have been in various positions, had the opportunity to travel around the world. And it's really interesting when you go to places, particularly like Eastern Europe. I was in Ukraine last week, and our organization is trying to provide really spiritual support to many of the folks who are serving there.
Thank you.
But you talk to people who are in other places, we have our problems and our angst and anxiety over what we do, but in places like that where there is very little due process, the legal system is not trusted by anyone in the country. What we have here is really special, even when it doesn't go the way that we want it to.
That is a great comparison, and I couldn't agree with you more. In my visitation with other countries and what goes on, whether it be in Russia or as you said, Ukraine or South Korea, you go over there and spend a little bit of time, and you look at our system, and it is beautifully exceptional.
We are at a strange moment in time historically as a nation right now. Whether you're on the left or the right, I think we all agree that it's weird and we don't know what to make of all of it. One of the things that's happening right now is a very marked rise in crime across the country, violent crime. Again, laws have changed here in California so that you can walk into a store and steal something less than $1,000 or a lot of somethings that total less than $1,000 and walk away because no one's going to prosecute you. District attorney in the city of Los Angeles has basically said he's not going to prosecute criminals at all. We saw a police officer in Los Angeles killed recently by someone who should have been in prison. This is happening across the country, though. What do you make of the rise in crime right now that we're experiencing? It's pretty unprecedented.
It is unprecedented, and there's several things that are going at play. One is we can't forget that some of this has some play because of the open border, and drugs are just copious amounts of drugs everywhere. And whether it's the user that has become psychotic, or it's the cartel that is doing business and have no value of human life. So we've got all of those things happening with that market. In our society I believe, I will tell you today, that in my jail today, we have about 4,300 inmates. 80% of them will have three things in common. One, they've never had a father in their life. Two, they don't have a high school education. And three, they're motivated by narcotics of some sort, that they're either an addict or they're a user of it, or they're involved in the drug trade. So those three things are happening. And so that's in this generation. Our juvenile generation, there's about 90% fatherless rate. So one of the key issues is our children that are being raised by the street, they're going to end up seeing somebody like me unless they're exceptionally disciplined or see something. And certainly like you, I think it's our church's time and opportunity to get involved in those and rise up and be those mentors for those young people that are there now to prevent them from being here now, or later rather. But I see that happening. So you got the drug trade, you've got an abundance of fatherless children, and then you have DAs like you just spoke of. If there is not consequences for your actions, then that is just going to continue to drive it up. It was the old criminal justice theory of the broken window. And if you don't enforce the code enforcement of the broken window, then it will lead to other issues. And in California in particular, we saw that narcotics have been made misdemeanors. You folks have let out everybody out of prison.
Right.
And I don't know what the governor expected. With that formula, there's nothing but crime going to go up. Homelessness is going to increase. All of those issues that affect us if we do not hold people accountable.
The fatherless issue is one that is so important to me. Again, as a parent, certainly, as someone who's been around young men and really has tried to, in many places in my life, help young men and encourage them and mentor young men. Why is that not the headline issue in a lot of this? Even looking at suicide rates among young people, all of these factors that we consider, the one thing that is rarely talked about is the fatherlessness issue. Why are we not talking about it, A, and what can we who are talking about it do to change that?
Well, it is beyond me, and I will tell you, everywhere I go and I get an opportunity to speak, I always bring up those issues of fatherhood.
Yeah.
But I don't see it catching hold in mainstream media. I don't even see it. It doesn't seem to be the glamorous thing to be talking about, or people don't want to approach it because it is complex. There's some people that says, wait a minute, maybe we don't need dads, which is a foolish statement. But I think that people ignore it. And I will tell you that it's not only the mainstream media what everybody blames, it's our churches. And being an evangelical Christian, I believe that we need to be out there taking care of our orphans. And I don't think we do a very good job of it.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. One of the pushbacks from the pro-choice community, those who are screaming right now about the Supreme Court decision with Roe and all of that, is that you Christians, all you care about is birth. You don't care about the life of the child once it's born. And that's statistically, I mean, there's a lot of research it's not true. However, I think a lot of our churches have set ourselves up to absorb that, because we're not doing a good job of caring for those who don't have fathers, who don't have good home situations. Even some with fathers need some help.
Yep.
What should the churches be doing that they're not doing?
The things that I would tell them to do is several. Is not everybody in the church pews is built for adoption. But first of all, let's just adopt the kids in our county that need adopting. Give them homes forever, because that's the key here. Yeah. That they have homes forever. Right here in Tarrant County, in our greater Tarrant County, we probably have, right now as I speak, 300 kids eligible for adoption, and nobody's taking them. And these are older kids, and it's going to be, it's a rescue operation.
Yeah.
And so that's the one thing. They need to be encouraging adoption, and they encourage the peer support around them for the people to adopt them. Maybe do fundraisers to make sure you have the money for private school, and get those kids not in secular school, but send them, my personal thing, to Christian school or faith-based schools. The second thing that I would love to see is get behind ministries and missionaries to go into our individual communities. Get those outreach missionaries going into our inner cities where these kids are at, and setting up ministries in there that will be mentoring these kids, be providing athletic programs, be maybe a source to make sure they have Christmases and stuff like that, and create relationships with these children that don't have a father, where they have somebody to go to, somebody to hold them accountable. Those are some of the key things that they need to be pouring in. But if they don't, it's going to get tougher.
How has, just as a curiosity, how has your position on faith and church and community been received as a sheriff in a pretty large county?
Well, I got to say, for the most part, it has been received okay. I have had people, I have a fan club that sometimes get mad at me for being a Christian and that kind of thing, but that's okay. That is first and foremost is the gospel and what we should be doing, and walking to it. Because I tell people all the time, I said, I'm not a citizen of this country. I'm on mission. I'm a citizen of heaven. And we get to walk forward with that.
That's awesome. I love that perspective too, because it probably changes everything for you, I would imagine. What you're doing is not a job now. It's something that has an eternal purpose.
Eternal purpose. It's a calling. And it's the same thing your son's been doing, is he's being called to a ministry.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great perspective. If we can shift a little bit to kind of the prescient issue in our country at this moment, it's guns. We talk about gun control, red flag laws, background checks, universal background checks, restricting ammunition and magazines. We could argue about all of that. And one of the things we do know, though, is that guns put in the wrong hands have dire consequences. And I'd love to maybe just start by first getting your perspective on what's happening. Obviously, we had the shooting in Uvalde, Texas. The shooting here recently in Illinois, tragic events, and others that we could point to in our country, of course. And it seems like we're going through a rash of that right now. I won't ask you to explain why that's happening, but can you talk about just guns generally, and maybe some things that you see that should change, or a better way of looking at what's happening? I heard today on a conservative radio station, the guy who was talking, he came to the point where he said, I've supported guns, I supported the Second Amendment, but this is a gun issue, we've got to do something about it. So everyone's kind of at that point where they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I get it, because it's an extremely emotional time to see the images of, families and children and all of those things. So that was a really long question, but can you just give us maybe some perspective on this, the better way to look at what's happening right now?
Well, first of all, I'll fully disclose I'm pro Second Amendment guy. I've been a firearms instructor and argued for concealed handgun license in Texas and open carry in Texas. I believe in individual responsibility,
Right.
I don't think that you can carry me around in your back pocket, as they say. I think that you've got to be able to take care of yourself a little bit. But I think we are at a time where here we got this, but it always turns toward this innate object that I've carried a gun all my life and it's done just fine. It hadn't shot any innocent people at all,
Right.
and the majority, we have what, 90 million to almost 100 million gun owners in the United States,
Sure.
and 99.9% of them do well with it. But we do have, and I don't have the stats in front of me. I think there's 27 or 30 people a day that die from gun violence, and that includes suicide. In fact, the majority of them, I think, are going to be suicide.
Right.
Well, if we put that in perspective of 117 people a day die in car accidents, and that car hadn't killed those people. You don't hear car control coming out. It's always amazing to me is that a drunk driver in a car that's on probation can do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And he takes a lot of lives. But I know that these horrific crime scenes, these incredible crime screens where it's going on, and I often say, why are we looking to limit the rights of 99% of the people for that so small, even not even 1%, less than 1%, these people are doing wrong? I don't have a problem, and I just left a meeting on how do we profile that guy, because everybody in these shootings know who these people are. They knew who he was in Uvalde. They knew who he was in Chicago. They knew who he was down in Parkland. And they know who they are. We don't need red flag laws to be able to be good citizens, to have the courage to say, we need to watch Johnny. Johnny's indicating things. We've seen him on Facebook threatening this or some other media. And so my perspective is, until we get a handle on those things where people have the courage to boldly say, we got to watch Johnny and hold him accountable, I am very hesitant to limit rights. I'm very hesitant about red flag laws that become very subjective. Now, I will say that probably some of the better ones in the country are in Florida, where it's law enforcement based and it has some very good due process points and those kind of things. But red flags in general across the country, I think when you just go down to and sit in a family court for a little while and see if anybody will lie on a family member,
Yeah, right.
It happens in abundance. But I think that we look at the person and that we do these profiles and we deal with mental illness before we get to saying, well, we're going to start limiting Second Amendment rights.
What has changed? Guns have been around, forever. You mentioned you've carried a gun for many, many years. A lot of us have. There was a time not too long ago where having a gun in your car was not an uncommon event. And yet we go through these cycles, and we're certainly in one now where gun violence is in front of us. What are some of the causal factors? If you could point to a couple things, what has changed, I guess, is the big question. And I could put on my conspiracy hat, but I won't. So practically speaking, what has changed? Why are we dealing with this now when we weren't, 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
Well, I think the country has lost a little bit of its moral compass.
Yeah.
Our moral compass as a whole is off, that we are accepting more things. And again, going back to, there's been little or no consequences for some of these things.
Right.
And I go to Chicago that had, I think, 50 shot this weekend in Chicago, and strictest gun laws in the country.
Yeah.
But they have here's the deal on those victims, on those trigger pullers up there, when you hunt them down, where was Dad? Where was Dad?
Yeah.
And he's not there. And I think that this new moral code that we're seeing, where we make up stuff along the way and we don't have a go by, I think we're going to see more of it before it gets better.
Yeah. It's interesting too that not only is a dad not typically present or not involved, but these are young men. And again, when we connect this back to a lot of the gender issues that we're discussing right now, and just flipping upside down what God intended. Young men are completely lost. And you were in the Air Force, I was in the Marine Corps, and when I was in the Marine Corps, a lot of the young men there were there because they had never learned how to do stuff outside or operate a firearm, and they just wanted to experience that. And that was a safe place and a healthy place for them to experience that. But you see these young men now that have no purpose, no direction, and then somehow they get a gun and they're experiencing it, but at the loss of life, which is pretty crazy. The point you made about personal responsibility, David Barton is someone that I know well, and I don't know if you know David Barton, but he's incredible.
Big fan of David Barton.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's on our board here for our organization, and I know him well. I've been to his ranch a couple times, and every time we get together, there's some kind of shooting involved. So he loves guns, right? But he's written on this and talked about it, and he talks about how the founder's intent would have been that the community would train up young people to understand how to operate a firearm, understand the implications and the personal responsibility that comes along with that. And I feel like we've missed that as well. We don't have, the older generation, whoever that is, men or women, teaching those who are coming along how to safely use a firearm. I taught my kids how to use a gun when they could stand up and hold one. In fact, I remember taking my son to the range, and they had to put him up on a thing. He had to stand up on a thing to get over the bench so he could shoot. And we've had guns in our house. I've always had guns in my house. I shouldn't admit this out loud, but I have loaded guns in my house that aren't in a lockbox. I've never had a problem because I taught my kids how important they are, how dangerous they are, how to handle them well. But man, we've missed even that, the community idea of teaching young people how to use a firearm.
You are absolutely right. And that used to be, growing up, especially anywhere in America, they talked about that. They talked about how to handle a shotgun or a rifle or a handgun. And those things are coming up. And I've taught all of my kids the same thing. As soon as they're old enough, we're heading to the range, and they're going to get to look at and squeeze triggers and do all those things.
When you look at the United States, just really broadly, again, from where you sit, it's a very different view than I think most of us have. What are you encouraged about? What are you maybe not discouraged about, but concerned about? And what are some things we should be doing right now to not only preserve what we have, but take some ground as the pendulum does hopefully swing back in the conservative direction?
Well, I think that from the 30,000 feet, I am concerned with national policy right now. I'm very concerned with where we're going with the border issues. I'm very concerned with the Ukraine war and making sure that it doesn't spread.
Yep.
I think all of those things are certainly a threat. I think also that we're missing the boat, that I think China is a clear and current threat to us nationally, and that they are in conspiracy with, at least with a wink and a nod, they are in conspiracy theories with the Mexican cartels, along with Venezuela, and they're weaponizing drugs like fentanyl coming into this country that we're seeing about 300 a day die from fentanyl. And no major media is on that. Imagine a jumbo jet going down every day. But from the 30,000 or 40,000 foot level, I'm concerned about those things on the outer course that affect America. The effective leadership that we have in Washington is stalemated. So sometimes that's a great thing. But sometimes that we do need to move the ball down the road some with some things, especially when people are talking about harnessing, diminishing, limited our civil rights. Our forefathers knew what they were doing. And but I think that those are the things that I'm concerned about. The things that I see that I think that are going well, people doing things well. I have never seen, or at least in Texas, and I almost bet in California the same way, we have tremendous amount of groups emerging to deal with human trafficking. A lot of non-government agencies, they're popping up everywhere to deal with human trafficking. And we're very active in that. We rescued 30 people just a week ago.
Wow.
And so we want those people taken care of and getting new starts in lives. And I see good, hard-working people coming out and saying, how can we help? And how can we engage in that? Is that I'm optimistic about, right now I'm dealing with state legislatures because of Roe v. Wade, is they want to prepare at a state level, how can they help and how can they make sure that it doesn't cost $20,000 to adopt a baby? Let's make it affordable, figure out how to do that. And let's do some of those things. So I love those hearts. I love those hearts for ministry. And I know there's some churches that I'm seeing that are really doing. We got a church here in town that's building a facility that'll house 100 trafficking victims. Wow. They're going to take care of them. And so when I see things like that, it's like the fight still rages, and we're doing well. There are noble people wanting to do noble things.
That's good. Sheriff Waybourn, really appreciate it. Your perspective is wonderful. I love it because it's underpinned with faith, and that has to be the foundation of the whole thing. And if you're looking at this world around us without that foundation, I don't know how you keep moving forward. But then with your understanding of law enforcement and what's happening in the world, thank you. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, I'm honored to be with you today, and I appreciate your organization and what it's doing for vets and first responders and so forth. And I'm excited for your son, and you tell him to go home and read Romans 13, and he'll see who he is.
That's awesome. I will pass that on to him, and I'm thankful for where we are too. We're in a good community with a good police department and a good county, so I'm excited for it. So yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day. The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. We've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live. Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org. Grateful for men like Sheriff Waybourn. I don't think we always understand. We probably understand now better than we did a couple of years ago, but just how important our county sheriffs are across the country. With so many of the issues that we've dealt with in our nation and so many of even the restrictions that have been placed on us and all this other stuff, really it's the sheriffs that have stood up and led the way in so many places. Grateful for these men and grateful for Sheriff Waybourn and his perspective. Just his time coming on and talking to us about these issues today. If you are not yet subscribed to our podcast here, The Situation Report, please subscribe right now. Wherever it is you're listening from, hit that subscribe button. That means that this show will then be fed to you automatically a couple times a week, and we want to make sure that you are in the loop of all that's happening. Some great guests, and looking forward to sharing those with you. Also, take some time, go over to YouTube. You can find our channel, The Situation Report. Search for us there. Some of our episodes will come up. Hit that icon, that picture, and that will take you to the channel. Hit subscribe, the notification bell, and then leave us a comment. Share that content out. That would be fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you next time.